Welcome to the place where we learn about and learn from the leaders in our field who are powering creativity. I'm Aaron Dworkin, and this is Arts Engines. Just a heads up, everyone, that my new book, Lessons in Gratitude, a memoir on race, the arts, and mental health, published by the University of Michigan Press, is now available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. I encourage you to check it out. Thanks again for joining me here on Arts Engines. Today's guest is Shanta Thake, who serves as Chief Artistic Officer of the famed Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. Shanta, welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks for having me, Aaron.
Well, I'm so excited to be able to talk to you. Obviously, you have taken the artistic helm of, flagship artistic institution in, the landscape of not just our nation, but, globally. And so I thought I would actually just start out with kind of asking you about visioning, right? So many people who are in our audience are at their own arts institutions, are doing various programming, things like that, thinking about themes and these types of things. And so I just thought I'd, kind of ask you, how do you build and create vision, especially at, a pinnacle arts institution? How do you go about that? What's your mindset and approach?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think a lot about this. And I started at Lincoln Center in 2021, September of 21, which was obviously a very interesting time to start at an arts organization when a lot of things were shifting, changing. The world had shifted and changed so dramatically. I think one thing was that the board of Lincoln Center had adopted a new strategy in 2020, so before I arrived, and pre-COVID, that was about supporting the constituent organizations of Lincoln Center. So that was a different modality. There's 11 organizations on campus, one of which is Lincoln Center, that I am the artistic director of. And so thinking about our role a little bit differently in terms of as a support mechanism for these other organizations. The second was around innovation, and the third pillar of the strategy was around access and EDI. And so that was the starting place for me. That's obviously, I was brought in to help execute on that strategy through a programming lens. But then thinking about what that really meant when we think about, okay, how do you put that into the art that's on the stage? How do we talk about it? How does the audience interact with it? And we really thought of how do we remake ourselves into this civic cultural institution? How do we look to our history to teach us what we have done very well and build on that? How do we look towards things that we could do better? And so we started there, this idea of what does it look like to be a civic cultural institution that is living within these three pillars and is meeting the world in 2021. So I think this
Yeah.
mix of both looking at the past, looking at the future, but also being really grounded in the present of it's all new. How do we listen differently? How do we think differently? And the world was asking for something new from us, so we had to respond differently.
So I love all of this and pillars and that kind of help to give the framing for this work. And so there were a couple aspects that I wanted to kind of
Yeah.
touch on the DEI piece, but even before that, kind of the implementation, right? So again, so many people, in our audience who are looking and saying, okay, now we've got this, we have this framework and all that, but implementing, and especially implementing with multiple partners. And just wondering, as you have gone about that, any kind of key approaches or best practices that you use to actually say, okay, so we had this vision and all that, but now for a year from now to say this was actually done and done well. Anything about how you actually approach the implementation?
Couple couple things. One, this idea of strategy was really held pretty deeply, pretty quickly. I think because it was so simple. We have these three pillars, and everybody was working on them, not just programming. That was something that the marketing team understood, the technology team, the executive team. So everybody was really holding these three. So it was a good lens and a good filter through which to put activity in and to say, okay, obviously we would do this, we won't do this. I do a lot of whiteboarding. So I spent time with my team just writing out, what do we do now? We looked at a lot of data from the past. Who were our single ticket buyers? Did we have that many members? Who was our audience before? How do we make sure we don't lose people on the path towards becoming who we need to be right now? So there was a lot of work around that. We did focus groups with artist communities and really active listening and quick implementation. But I think this idea of having a bold, clear strategy that everything we would do, we would say, okay, is this fall within, does it improve access? Is it innovative? Does it
Right.
the constituents? It was a much
Right.
easier place to start. And you knew that once you had an idea, it wouldn't be met with a marketing team that was confused as to why we were choosing it. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
thought we moved really quickly. We moved a lot quickly, but it was because everybody kind of held this very clear strategy.
So I love that, and especially across all of the teams, and everyone bought in
Yeah.
and tied into that same vision, which is so key. And a lot of times things can fall apart without that. So change. So there are definitely a lot of people. I know I've been in different situations in my life, kind of trying to be a change agent, and so curious about that because right in bringing this in and your leadership and looking at change. I guess I would say, have you viewed yourself as kind of a change agent? And then beyond that, a lot of people fear change. There's often a lot of pushback to change, and it doesn't take until later on that people go, "Oh, the change was good," but in the midst of change, people are like, "Ah." Curious, basically, your thoughts on change and how you approach it as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I haven't had not thought of myself as a change agent. I love a stable nonprofit, life and thinking about how we're growing with a community and how we're changing. But I think the time for change was upon us and the reality of both resources available to us and to our audience and to our artists and what were we as actually resource rich comparatively to everybody else in our ecosystem. What was our responsibility to each of these sectors? And we couldn't sit back and say, okay, well, we have less resources than before. We had to really think about how do we meet our audiences and our artists at this moment when they are suffering. And we're suffering with them as humans living in a city deeply affected by a pandemic, and humans working in the arts in a city like New York, deeply affected by the pandemic. So I think, I feel like it was a time that we had to be people were asking, what have you done for me lately in a real way? What have you done for me, performing arts institutions? What are you doing for the city? What are you doing for your audience? What are you doing for our community? And I think we had to show up and answer that differently, and we did, and some of that was about taking real-time feedback and a lot of, I wouldn't say pushback. I think certainly some of the feedback, plenty of feedback that was, whoa, 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 what are you doing? Tell me about this. But I think those are all from people that were deeply invested in what Lincoln Center was for the past 50 plus years. And that's important to recognize that these are the people that have allowed us to flourish. And how do we make sure that we take that energy and offer it to more people, that we have more people that have buy-in into this same organization and be in that conversation. So I think
I love that.
um,
I love that.
but yeah, I don't see
Yeah.
myself as a change agent. However, I'm a good listener. And and I suppose that's how you make your life in music. But I think being able to
Uh,
take that and change in a real meaningful way was necessary for all of us.
I love that. Absolutely. And especially just the way that you're viewing the connection to and responsibility to the community. Absolutely love that. And so DEI, wanted to just be able to touch on briefly. Obviously, there's a lot of people that we have in our audience. We've had some past guests who now are kind of wrestling because it seemed like there was this period of pretty much, broad support for DEI, but now they feel like some of that support has ebbed or there's, increased pushback, et cetera. And so as you're kind of leading and incorporating that into this work that you're doing at Lincoln Center, any either approaches or strategies that you're using as you think about DEI now?
Yeah. I mean, I think where some of the language is shifting, like it has so dramatically over the last, 20 years of doing this work. I feel like we've changed our language around how we talk about it. But what we mean, one, I think DEI is best practice. If we just think about how do we want the most diverse folks at the table, folks that represent our community at the table, making decisions about the work that we do and how we do that work, we're going to have the best product and like the simplest, crassest way of talking about the work. And then for our work, we're not making cars. We really are in the business of reflecting humanity and we're reflecting our community. So people have to be seen in every part of the decision making, on the stages, in the marketing, in the way that we're moving through the world to do our best work and to do the work that we actually have to do as stewards of the resources that are given to us as a nonprofit in our sector. And I think pieces of this are, they can feel political when I think these are the least political things. This is about doing the work of holding up our community stories, reflecting our community, refracting those stories, giving places for people to gather together to see one another, and then making sure that we have ways in. And I mean, I'm deeply inspired when I got to Lincoln Center. We have an access team that has been around for 40 plus years, and they think about this work in a way that I had not really seen before, and certainly didn't have that resource available to me in other places. Where, of course, some of it was really accommodation based for a long time in terms of, okay, somebody comes, they need ASL, let's make sure that there's some, which in itself is, an incredible resource to offer. But it doesn't look like equity. It doesn't look like actual embrace of the community. It looks like, okay, we've got kind of a patched system. But the knowledge base was so strong, and they have all these beautiful programs around communities with dementia, communities with neurodiverse families coming in and seeing all of the constituent organizations work and building out that practice, doing relaxed performances. We just did our full season of relaxed performances across campus that our team at Lincoln Center led. And so I think there are people coming to our shows that have not been to shows, period. Uh,
Awesome.
and that's remarkable. But I think something that the pandemic for me, I feel like I'm rambling, but I think for the pandemic, what I recognized during the pandemic is that I'm seeing shows so often, right? And I'm seeing 5 shows a week. But most people, it's a special event or it's a non-event. They're not, that's not part of their lived experience because it's too expensive. It's not for them. They don't think if they don't have the ability to actually attend in a number of ways. And I think I started to recognize that during the pandemic of, oh, no, this is one, I'm seeing people in virtual shows that I have never seen in real life. And how am I making sure that those are folks that are continue to be a part of this? I'm seeing the actual loss for people like me that haven't seen shows in a lot, that are missing that live experience. And at the same time, I'm experiencing the joy of people that are seeing a show for the first time that have
Right.
never been invited.
Absolutely.
So that's my very long way of talking and thinking about EDI, which is that it's the least political thing I think there is, or the most political, but it's not, I don't think it
Right.
needs to be divisive. It should
Right.
undergird our work of telling the best stories to the most people.
And that's what I love too, is how you were just describing how it's just so embedded in your thinking and in the approach to all of the work. And that is truly wonderful. And unfortunately, we are just about out of time, but I always like to ask of all my guests, this work obviously is amazing, and the way in which you have just, been able to help bring all of these stories to the various stages and platforms and venues of Lincoln Center. There's got to be some tough days and days where it seems like, oh, these obstacles can't be overcome. And just wondering, as a leader, as an arts leader, are there any mechanisms that you use for yourself on the days that, are the toughest?
Well, I love a glass of rosé.
Nice, nice.
I think, the days that are tough, I do think I feel very fortunate that I have this remarkable team that I am surrounded with. And I think for any of us that's having a bad day or things did not go well for you, or somebody on the last day of our summer festival, which brings hundreds of thousands of people, we had just remarkable amount of shows and experiences, and everybody was so thrilled. But we had this one moment where we had to cut off a set because it was running too long, and and my team member was so upset that she had to deliver this message to the artist and have this really hard conversation about, okay, we have to we have to end now. We have a sound ordinance. I was like, this is not your story of this festival. This is a one moment. And just thinking, being able to do that for one another, of this is not this comment, this day, this mistake, this whatever, that we have to model community for one another, if we plan on doing that for the rest of New York and creating these spaces. So I think that's, my team and the team of people that are mentoring me, and that includes my staff, are so important. And then I think artists I always turn to an artist. I always feel like there's most of my mentors are artists, and I feel like there's always some inspiration or some depth of knowledge or even experience that I just am not seeing in a moment, that an artist, I think, can always help illuminate.
Shanta Thake, you truly are one of the arts engines who is powering human creativity in our world. Thank you so much for everything that you do, and thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Aaron. It's a pleasure.
Just a heads up, everyone, that my new book, Lessons in Gratitude, a memoir on race, the arts, and mental health, published by the University of Michigan Press, is now available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold. I encourage you to check it out.